Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call to order our first hearing of the evening, and this is the application of Jillian C. Buckley. Did I pronounce your name correctly? Okay, great. Are you going to be making the presentation? Then why don't you come on up and make yourself comfortable, and I'll summarize the advertisement, do a few other formalities, and then we'll get going with the substance of the hearing. It gets hotter as the night goes on, so don't worry. It's nice and cool now. So this is Ms. Buckley's application. It's dated February 11th, 2013, and Ms. Buckley is seeking a variance from the terms of Section 6C1 of the bylaw, seeking to build a 10-foot by 17-foot two-story addition on the right side of her existing single-family residence located at 33 Waldo Road in Milton, which is located in a Residence C district. The addition is set back 6 feet 8 inches from the right side property line rather than the 10 feet required by the bylaw under Section 6C1. All is set forth in Ms. Buckley's application and plans on file with the board and open to public inspection. Let me do some introductions. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me tonight, to my immediate left, is board member Brian Hurley, and to my immediate right is attorney Frank O'Brien, also a board member. The rules of the board are such that we'll first hear from the applicant. We'll hear from people who have questions of the applicant. We'll listen to people who wish to speak in support of your application, if any. And then we'll hear from any person present who wishes to object to your application. We're tape recording the proceeding this evening, as always, so that we'd ask that before anyone speaks, tell us your name and address. Speak up nice and clear and loud so we'll have an accurate record of the proceeding if we have to refer to the electronic tape for the purposes of writing a decision. In addition to the advertisement, which I've summarized, we're going to have as evidence of Ms. Buckley's application dated February, it looks like it's the 11th, 2013. And it is, that's consistent with the ad. We have a denial letter from our building commissioner, Joseph Prondak, telling Ms. Buckley that she needs to come in and see the board and request a variance. That's dated 1/31/2011. Ms. Buckley has filed with us a plot plan of land by Robert E. Hannigan of Quincy, Massachusetts. The plot plan is dated October 30, 2012, and it shows the subject lot and Waldo Road and the proposed addition and the various dimensional issues. And Ms. Buckley has also filed some, I'll call them sketches, showing us the proposed addition. It's in 2 sheets entitled The Buckley Renovation, and it's revised as of January 14, 2013, and it was filed with the board, or at least with the town clerk on January 22nd, 2013. So we'll have all of those documents in evidence, and you are the applicant, Ms. Jillian Buckley. Good. Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us about your application and your plans and why you believe you should be given a variance.
Okay. My name is Jillian Buckley. I live at 33 Waldo Road in Milton, Massachusetts. I brought with me this evening some pictures of the existing structure.
Great. Thank
I
you
have
very
a pre-existing non-conforming 3-season porch that is attached to the right side of my house. It's a wonderful structure that I am only able to use a couple months of the year because it's not heated, and I would love to make it into part of my dining room and put a second story on top of it to make a master bathroom and a master closet. The structure is starting to degrade a bit and is in need of repairs. So regardless, it needs to probably be taken down or at least have major repairs done to it. And it would be a much more usable space if I could make it into a 4-season part of my house, an existing part of my house. I live at the end of a cul-de-sac, so our lot dimensions, as you can see, are pie-shaped. I live at the very end, so it's pie-shaped. So the front of my property line is very close to my next-door neighbor, Jenny Anzalone, and she is fully in support of this. I believe that she wrote a letter. I think a letter from her, yeah. I believe she wrote a letter. She offered to come this evening. I told her she probably didn't have to.
I don't see a copy of, oh, good, we have it. While you mention that, let me read the letter, we'll have it in.
Okay.
It's dated February 14, 2013. Dear Board of Appeals, I'm writing to answer your letter regarding Ms. Jillian Buckley's application for a variance under Section 6C. I think it says 2, but well, I guess we're 6C1. Living in Milton for 57 and a half years.
Yep.
She finds it will be a most positive effect on the value of homes in our lovely street. And it's signed sincerely, Jeanette E. Anzalone. So we thank Ms. Anzalone for her letter. Why don't you continue with
Thank
the
you.
presentation?
I believe there were also a number of emails that were sent in support of this as well. I believe that this will add value to my property and thus the neighborhood.
Let me see if I can find the emails, because I did not see them in the packet unless they're attached to something. Okay, great. Thank you. Right you are. We have a series of emails. Let me see if they are the same or different. They're all different. So let me take care of getting these into the record. We have an email from Kathleen Roust of 32 Waldo Road, Milton. Dear Ms. Fitzgerald, that's our long-standing now, principal clerk of the board. I'm writing in support of Jillian Buckley of 33 Waldo Road, who's applying for a variance for additions and improvements to her property. I have lived in Milton for about 35 years and have known Jill since she moved here. I have no reservations about her plans to renovate her home and support her 100% in her effort to obtain a variance. I hope there is no opposition to her request. I think you agree with that.
As well.
And that she can go forward with her plans as soon as possible. I hope the Board of Appeals grants her variance. Thank you. Kathleen Roust, R-O-U-S-T, 32 Waldo Road, Milton, Mass. We also have an email from Tracy, it looks like Duron, D-O-I-R-O-N, of 12 Waldo Road. Good morning, Mary. Mary's more popular than the board these days. I understand that Jillian Buckley at 33 Waldo Road is applying for a construction variance. As a resident of 12 Waldo Road, I see no issues with granting the request. The renovation will only enhance the property and surrounding homes. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. So we thank Tracy Duron. And we also have a letter from Laurie Stillman and Robert Rozovsky. They live at 29 Waldo Road, Milton, Mass. And again to Mrs. Fitzgerald. We write as neighbors of Jillian Buckley. Her home, located at 33 Waldo Road, is one house away from our own. We support her application for a variance to build out a room out of her existing porch and a master bedroom above that. We have every confidence that she will handle the project responsibly, and we ask that you approve her request. So we thank Laurie Stillman and Robert Rosofsky for sending in their letters. And let me ask you, the people who have sent these letters in support of your application, do they represent the immediate abutters to your property on both
Yes.
the left and the right-hand side?
If looking at my house, to the right, the immediate abutter is Jenny Anzalone.
Okay.
And the immediate abutter to my left are George and Barbara Fournier. I'm like having a blank. George and Barbara Fournier.
Oh.
And I spoke with them as well today, and they asked if they needed to be here tonight, and I said probably not, but they are in support of the project.
Okay, and they've told you they support the
Yes.
application for variance?
It's a
Okay.
very small street. There are only about 15 houses on the street, and we're very close as neighbors, so.
Okay, great. Well, I've interrupted you too much. Why don't you continue with your presentation and finish it up, and we'll see if the board members have any questions.
That's pretty much all I have to submit. I seek to replace the structure with a 10 by 17 by 2-story addition. It's a little bit larger than the existing structure, although basically the same as falling down from the roof line, so it fits pretty much in the footprint of what's there. It's just bumping a little bit out the back to my existing deck. Again, it'll be used for a master closet and a master bathroom, and I hope to add value to the property and thus to the neighborhood. And the existing structure, as you can see, will not look out of place among the other houses on the street. They're blending the roof to keep up with the gambrel side of the house.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Let me ask you just a couple of questions.
Sure.
I know my colleagues are going to ask you anyway, so I might as well beat them to it. Is it fair to say that if you're granted the variance, that the addition will be constructed in a manner that's substantially consistent with the plans which you filed with the board?
Yes,
And so when Mr. Prondak goes out there to do an inspection, he'll know just what he's looking for.
Yes.
And he won't see something different.
No.
Okay? Good. And the second question that I wanted to ask you was whether the proposed addition is going to be reasonably consistent with the existing color scheme of the house, and it looks to me like the architecture is reasonably similar, though these plans are somewhat general. And so it's going to look like a cohesive addition
Yes.
to your existing home.
yes. It will probably look even more cohesive than this does now, because this is sort of a square box that hangs off the side, because it's a framed-in porch. So he's integrating it with the roof line in order to make it integrate better with the architecture.
And
as
make it more
stands.
attractive. Okay, great. Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. Brian Hurley, do you have any
I
questions?
don't have any
of the
questions,
applicant?
Mr. Chairman, thank
Mr.
you.
O'Brien, please.
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have no questions of the panel. I don't have any further questions of you at this time. Let's see if anybody is present this evening who has any questions of your application. Is anybody present this evening who wishes to pose any questions to Ms. Buckley regarding her application for variance? And so the record's going to indicate there's no such person present. Let me ask the more ominous question of the evening, whether there's anybody present this evening who opposes this particular application for variance. And so everyone's keeping their peace. There's no such person present. So if you don't have any additional things to say, what we'll do is we'll end the evidence portion of this hearing, and we'll consider the application and in open session, as we're required to do under the open meeting law, and we'll vote on it this evening.
Okay.
So Mr. Frank O'Brien, please.
Mr. Chairman, I would tend to vote in favor of this. It's similar to many such variances that this board has granted in the past. I think it will be a tasteful addition to the neighborhood and add value to the property, so I would vote in favor.
Okay, Mr. Brian Hurley, please.
I agree with Mr. O'Brien. I take great comfort from the fact that the neighborhood all seems to support this proposal, and I think the application was well presented this evening. Thank you, and I will vote in favor.
Good. Okay, well, I agree with both of my colleagues. You did a wonderful job presenting the application. Maybe you've been present at a few other hearings or something, but
Fun, thanks, Mary.
and you did your homework. You talked with the neighbors most affected by the application. Everyone has approved the application. Nobody is opposed to it. Looking at the existing sun porch, its time has passed,
Yes.
and this looks like a very tasteful addition that not only will benefit you and your family personally, but will benefit the neighborhood. So I also intend to vote for this application. Let me just ask you one question before we do put it to a vote, and that is in terms of your construction schedule and all of that. Do you have builders ready to go on this? And
I do.
let's vote on it, and I'll come back to that. So all of those in favor of granting the relief requested by Ms. Buckley, say aye.
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 Okay, well, congratulations, you got your variance. The procedures of the board, everyone, you can certainly feel free to applaud. We hope we get applause at the next two hearings.
All right.
But in point of fact, it's going to take us about 10 days to 2 weeks to
That's fine.
crank out a decision. We write them ourselves. It's not cut and paste. Then it has to be signed up by the board, and sometimes it takes a few extra days to get the board members to.
Right.
Sometimes they travel or in court and other things. Then the decision is then filed with the town clerk. Okay, so there's a 20-day appeal period technically before you can get your building
Mary
permit.
prepped me well.
Okay,
I
great.
actually have a separate permit. They're doing a little work inside to update a bathroom and some stuff inside, so they have plenty to do.
Okay, then
Time to wait.
that's great, and your contractor can keep in touch with Mr. Prondak
Yep.
about securing the building permit once the 20 days has expired.
Okay.
And Mr. Prondak also can help you in making sure that your variance is recorded in the Registry of Deeds.
Okay.
You really have to record it in the Registry of Deeds to have it effective. and he'll tell you approximately what the cost is and how you get that done. And he'll supply you with a certified copy of the award of the variance and a notification by the clerk that there's been no appeals. Okay? Whether there's a fee for that or not, I'm not sure, but you can check with Mr. Prondak. and
Okay.
he'll take care of it. Okay? Well, congratulations on your variance.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your consideration.
And thank you for coming tonight. You want to volunteer on this one? Thank you. Want to make sure I don't scoop up some of, bye-bye now, thank you. Some of my other papers and cause some consternation. Well, that's all right, I didn't see them, they were appended, that's all right, there's no big deal. When I saw them, I actually remembered there had been some, but, are we all set for our second hearing?
All set?
Mr. and Mrs. Eister or Easter? Eister, why don't you come on up and make yourself at home, and I will take care of some of the formalities while you're doing that, okay? This is the application, this is our second application of the evening. It's a 7:45 hearing at about 7:50. This is the application of Louis and Sarah Eister. It's dated March 4th, 2013, and Mr. and Mrs. Eister are seeking a variance from the terms of the Milton bylaw, section 5A1, and they seek to build a shed dormer to the existing third floor of their existing residence and to build a 6-foot by 6-inch by 14 feet third floor extension with an A-frame roof at the existing single-family residence at 10 Galen Street in Milton. This residence is located in a Residence C district. The height regulations in Milton regulate buildings to a height of 2.5 stories, and there's a technical aspect to the bylaw that says if the first floor of the dwelling is more than 4 feet high, and here it's 4.25 feet high, then the basement is considered a story. And that sets off a lot of complicated things, which we're experiencing here. In this application, the existing third floor also exceeds the 2/3 in area of the floor immediately below by an area of 23 square feet. So as a result of all of this, the top level is considered a full story, and therefore this would technically be a 4-story building as the bylaw defines the height regulations. In fact, the building is not more than 35 feet, as you're going to tell us, so it's within the height regulations, but the density regulations, how they work out, technically would make it 4 stories. So the Eisters are seeking an application to build this particular addition. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Milton Board of Appeals. With me this evening, to my immediate right is board member attorney Frank O'Brien, and to my immediate left is board member Brian Hurley. The rules for this hearing are going to be just the same as the last one. We'll hear from the applicants. We'll hear from any questions that people may have of the applicants, and we'll certainly hear from anybody who wishes to not only ask questions of the applicants, but wishes to speak in opposition to this application for variance. We're tape recording the proceedings as always, so that we'd ask that anyone who wishes to speak, first tell us your name and address, speak up nice and clear and loud so we'll have an accurate transcription of the proceeding if we have to revert to the electronic tape in order to prepare a decision. So in addition to the advertisement, which I've summarized for the record, We have Mr. and Mrs. Eister's application, which we'll have in evidence, 3/14/13. We have a letter from Mr. and Mrs. Eister. It appears to be undated. It discusses the reasons that they're asking for a variance. I'm not going to read this into the record because you're probably going to make this part of your presentation. We also have some specifications of the proposed addition, and we also have some proposed stamped building plans from a registered architect, Louis Bauman Eister. Wait a second.
My grandfather.
Is this their
My
grandfather? How
yes.
wonderful. So your grandfather is planning your renovation.
Yeah, he has helped out a lot.
Okay, well, aren't you lucky? And so we've got 4 or 5 particular plans showing the proposed addition. We also have, I believe this is a plot plan of land. No, it's more building plans. Let me see, do we have a plot plan here? I thought we did.
There should be a plot plan in
I'm
there.
sure there is. Hold on, I'm right in the middle of the photographs. Before I get to a plot plan, we have the denial letter by Mr. Prondak dated January 23rd, 2013.
I don't see one, John.
I don't see a plot plan. If you have one,
I do have one.
I'd love to see one. Great. Do you mind if we?
Nope, you
You
can-
need this one, we'll keep
I
this
have
as part
copies.
of the record, that's great. We always like to have plot plans. This one is for the Eister residence, 10 Galen Street, and it's prepared by the Ponset Valley Survey Associates dated May 16, 2012. It shows the residence, the driveway, the lot size, and the proposed addition as you intend to construct it. So we thank Mr. and Mrs. Eister for providing those materials, together with an array of photographs. And I know in your presentation, you're going to tell us what these photographs depict. So without further ado, welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Well, thank you very much for having us.
Great.
Lou Eister, and this is my wife, Sarah.
Hello. Welcome. Good to have you.
So we are asking to construct an A-frame dormer and a shed dormer on the east-faced facade of our house. The A-frame dormer is not extending beyond the current perimeter of the house as is. There's an existing flat roof that A-frame would be constructed over, and the shed dormer would die into it. And I'll show you that in the pictures that we have here. So the existing building is a non-conforming building as is. We bought the house this past summer. We've done extensive renovations to the inside of it it was very distressed, and we brought it back to life. We've been there, we've pretty much worked on every aspect from the existing front porch to an interior renovation of the kitchen. And now what we're trying to do is, make the third level accessible to individual rooms. This shed dormer allows us to have a full height access through a staircase that is already in place and offer individual access to the 2 rooms that are up on the 3rd floor. As outlined in the denial letter, we are currently under the 35 feet in the height restriction.
Total height of the structure.
The dormers would be under that 35 feet and meet all setbacks from the front, rear, and sides of the property. The existing grade is 0.25 inches above the average 4 feet, which is required. This does make our basement a floor, even though it is below grade. And again, the A-frame that we're going to be building over the flat roof adds the 23 square feet that exceeds the 2/3 per VA1 bylaw. So in our application, we have included pictures of existing neighbors' homes, which show the same type of architecture that we would be proposing in our application, with dormers on the 3rd level. You'll see.
Okay, do you want to show us some of those?
Sure.
And perhaps tell us the address where they're
Sure.
located?
This home here is around the corner from us. It is 5 Bailey Ave.
You have better eyes than I do, I can't make that out. But it's either 3 or 5 Bailey Avenue.
Correct, which is right off of Galen Street. This home here, which shows, so the home I just, in the picture, they have dormers on all 3 sides of their 3rd floor. The home on the corner of Bailey and Galen, which is this home, has an A-frame, which is what we would be proposing, with a shed dormer that goes into it where the staircase goes up. This home, 18 Lyman, which is located at the end of Galen Street, has 2 shed dormers on either side of the A-frame peak. All of these 3 homes that we provided pictures of, the owners of those homes have given us a, approval. My wife and I have gone around, we actually put the letter together, and went around to our neighbors. Each individual direct abutter, as well as some of the neighbors that we have pictures of their homes in our application, and all are in favor of our proposed project.
Okay, and they've all essentially signed somewhat of a petition.
Exactly.
So you've presented us with 6 or 7, and I'll go through these. The text of each of the letters is the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read one of the letters.
Sure.
And then I'll get involved with the people who sent it. You may have to help me with some of their names, okay? So the letters are all dated February 7th, 2013, to the Board of Appeals. They say to whom it may concern. We would like to offer our support for the proposed addition to our neighbors Lou and Sarah Eister's home located at 10 Galen Street in Milton. We have seen their proposed plans and feel that the design would fit nicely with the existing architecture in the neighborhood. Further to this, we are very pleased with the renovations and upgrades that they have already completed to date, and we know they will do an excellent job on this portion of their house. So the first one is signed by, it looked like Istvan and Edith, E-N-Y-E-D-Y, Inyeti, or something close to that.
Correct.
Of 15 Lyman Road, so we thank the Inyetis for their letter. We have a similar letter signed by Laura Rich at 7 Galen Street. Thank Ms. Rich. From a Diane Colligan, whomever she may be, of 4 Bailey Avenue. I should say that she's the former principal clerk of the Board of Appeals, Diane Colligan, for years. We have one from, it looks like Kenny O'Connor, and I just can't read Mrs. O'Connor's first name. It may be Mary Lou or something to that
It's
effect.
Kerry.
That's what it'd be.
And so Mike is actually here
Oh,
in
okay.
support of our
Oh,
project.
great, good.
Mike is our
It
neighbor.
is Mike and Kerry, I'm sorry. Great, thank you. 4 Galen Road. Do you want to say anything in support of this application? or-
the appropriate time to.
Sure.
If you want to, of course.
So obviously I'm here in strong support of the Eisters. My wife Carrie and I live directly adjacent to their property, direct abutters. The proposed addition would be on my side, so if there was someone who would oppose it, I would think it would be me, or Carrie and I. We have absolutely no objections or reservations or concerns to the proposed work. Strongly support it. I'm here to reinforce our position. As they've noted, they've done extensive work to the property that was previously very neglected, distressed. They've been very welcome additions to the neighborhood. Galen Street's a very tight-knit community. Sarah's not only a lifelong resident of Milton,
Great. Thank you for coming this evening, and thank you for your kind remarks. We have another petition that's signed by Christine Hogan of 6 Bailey Avenue in Milton. We have another one that's signed by, could be Rachel Mulhern, or 31, is it Rachel Mulhern? It's remarkable. At 31 Lyman Road. We have another one from Robert and Susan Peterson of 12 Bailey Avenue. We have another petition that's signed by the owner of 3 Bailey Avenue. Perhaps you can help me with this, I just cannot read the writing. Is it, it looks like Raymond somebody, or?
Ray and Karen Dewhurst.
Okay.
They are actually the picture that.
They have the 3 dormers on.
Okay, great. So the Dewhurst have sent their petition in, duly signed. We have one from John Giannakouros, Gianakouros, of 8 Bailey Avenue. Daniel Moniz of 10 Bailey Avenue has sent in a letter, as has James Malloy of 18 Lyman Road. So we want to, first of all, thank you for securing these particular assents, and thank the neighbors for writing to the board in support of your application. So why don't you continue with
Great.
your application? If you
So,
have
so that just gets to the pictures of our house as in its current state, which is, it's the red house, but I think you guys have black and white pictures, but it's these 2 pictures here. Show the 2 faces of the east and west elevations. You'll see here the east elevation is the one that has the flat roof, and that's where we would be proposing the A-frame. And 4 feet back from the front of the house is where the shed dormer would start, which gives us our front setback, and it would die into that A-frame. It would be roughly, I believe it's 3 or 4 feet down from the peak,
Okay.
and that's all detailed accurately on the architectural drawings that we provided. The architectural details that we did provide show front, rear, and side elevations of the home, as well as a floor plan, new, existing, and proposed. So you'll see the square footage that we'd be gaining really is over that roof area
Over
as
the
shown.
Okay, and these plans are actually sealed by a registered architect, and
Correct.
they're more technically sufficient than the
Correct.
plans at the last
Correct.
hearing, which were more of a sketch.
On that point, when we did our original renovations to the inside of the home on the first floor and second floor, we upgraded the structure to accept this type of addition, dormer, weight, and structability for future use. So we've taken that into consideration in our current design and construction.
Let me just ask you the 2 questions that I certainly asked the people at the last hearing. And the first is, if you receive your variance this evening, we can expect that the proposed additions will be in substantial conformity with the registered plans which you filed with us.
Correct.
You're not going to be making any substantial changes.
No.
And then secondly, that, kind of an obvious question, but that your proposed addition will be consistent in color and in architecture with the existing dwelling. It's not, you're not going to put a different color on the proposed addition, or?
No, we might end up painting the whole house at some point.
Sure,
but,
or some other different color.
Correct, correct.
Let me ask you one question. It sounds like you've done a tremendous amount of improvements to this residence, and have you been living in the home while all of this
Well,
construction was
I'll
taking
let
place?
Sarah.
My mom lives just around the corner, on the corner of Daly and Pleasant. So she lives in a 2-bedroom, 900 square foot little house that we all lived in the summer.
Oh, and what size family do you have?
So we have a 2-year-old daughter and one on the way. So, and a big dog, like Winona.
It was a hectic summer, to say the least. But we were able to move into the home in September.
Are you
So-
going to be again, living with your mother once this addition starts, if you get your
I
variance?
think
or-
we'll be able to swing through on accident.
Yeah.
I don't know if we might be back anyway.
Oh, you're going to write a book about your experiences here, and maybe able to pay for your
Tell
addition.
a therapist, yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. Brian Hurley, do you have any
I
questions
do
of
not.
the
I think
applicants?
it was well done, so I don't have any questions.
Mr. O'Brien, do you have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, no.
Well, this is remarkable. This is the second hearing in a row which Mr. O'Brien, who's usually an inquisitive board member, has not asked a question. I don't have any further questions. Let me see if, is there anybody present here this evening who has a question of Mr. and Mrs. Eister regarding this proposed variance application? And the record's going to indicate there's no such person present. I'll ask the obvious question. Is there somebody present here tonight who hasn't submitted a petition, but who wishes to speak in support of the Eister's application for variances? Okay, so there's no takers for that question. And lastly, is there anyone present this evening who wishes to be heard in opposition to the Eister's application for zoning relief? Okay, and the record indicates there's no such person present. So unless you have something further to add, and since you're ahead, you may want to quit while you're ahead.
Yeah, I think we're
We'll
good.
close the hearing and discuss your application in open session, as we did in the first hearing, and vote on the application. So, Mr. Frank O'Brien, please.
Mr. Chairman, the reason why I was uncharacteristically silent is because this is one of the better presented petitions that I have seen as I've sat on this board. As you know, Mr. Chairman, these types of petitions for relief are not routinely granted on the part of this board. We do have we don't like third floor additions. However, this particular one, it's consistent with the neighborhood. It's tastefully designed. Frankly, you've done your homework, and you've made a case that the amount of the problem, if you will, that causes you to be here is de minimis. The size of the dormer and everything else is reasonable. And for all of those reasons, Mr. Chairman, I'd be in favor of granting the relief sought.
Okay, Mr. Brian Hurley, please.
I agree with all that Frank said. Said it well.
Well, I agree with my colleagues. I think you did present a wonderful application, but more than that, you presented a compelling application. Your house is not higher than the 35-foot height requirement. It's really kind of a density mathematical calculation issue. And you presented a compelling story of taking a residence which is in need of substantial relief. I think it was described as distressed by somebody here. And working your way through it and living your way through it. And it's burdensome. And you have courage to do it again, but you're doing it for your family. And it sounds like your mother and everyone else has been very cooperative and pitching in. I think the application does have merit. I think Mr. O'Brien, as he has put it, this really is a very technical type of variance, and it doesn't adversely affect the neighborhood. And in fact, we have unanimous neighborhood support. We have more petitions here than we've seen in a long time, people willing to express their opinions. So I, too, support this application and intend to vote for it. So let's take care of the vote on the application, and then I'll get into your construction schedule and need. So all those in favor of granting the relief requested by Mr. and Mrs. Eister?
Aye.
Okay, well, congratulations. There are your variances, and we've given you the pleasure of another 6 months of agony. But seriously, in terms of your construction scheduling, do you intend to do this in the spring, the summer, or the fall?
We tend to start pretty much right away as soon as the permit is granted.
Okay.
We would submit the same plans that, we got rejected on.
Okay, so you heard my admonitions to the first applicants. It takes a couple of weeks to get the decision typed up and executed, sometimes maybe a little longer. 20-day appeal period, even though nobody has appeared tonight to oppose your application, before you can get your building permit. Sometimes you can do some demolition work inside, and you can work through Mr. Prondak, our building inspector,
Sure.
to make sure he's on board with all of that. And also make sure you talk with Mr. Prondak about recording your variance, so that your title is kept up to date, your variance becomes legally effective, and so if you sell the house 10 years from now, people won't wonder how that addition came to be.
Sure.
And find out you've got an illegal structure because you didn't record the variance.
Okay.
So congratulations on your
you.
variance. Thanks for coming this
Thank
evening.
you. Thank you very much.
And good luck. Best of luck with it.
Thank you very much.
I can do that, John. It's back to you.
Thank you, Brian. You get this photograph probably in there 4 times, but
That's the other one.
that's the first.
that's
the
Frank's.
Okay. You probably have multiple.
I think there are multiples. of them.
Several of those there.
They're all the same, weren't they?
Yeah,
They're all the same.
they were.
Yes, there are multiples of the same.
Yeah.
Your laptop should appear.
Where's the target going to be? The wall, or I don't know where they. Oh, really? Okay, that's fine. I'm sorry? Well, let's see where it goes. You can move any way you want. That's fine. Okay, we all set?
Yes.
Frank, you all set?
Yes.
Mrs. McGetrick, you all set, or you?
Yes.
Oh, you are,
Sorry.
good.
Almost, yeah.
Do you need a refill on your Coke, or are you all set?
No, but thank you for not minding that I always bring it with me. I like it to see you.
It's good to see you again. Welcome,
Nice to see
welcome
you.
to the board.
Thank you for having us.
Good. Let me take care of some of the ceremonies here. This is our third hearing of the evening. It's the 8 o'clock hearing at about 8:15, and this is on the March 4th, 2013 application of Seasons Hospice Foundation, which is a nonprofit entity, the applicant in this particular application. They're also a proposed purchaser under a purchase and sale agreement with the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston, and they're seeking a special permit from the terms of Section 3A7E of the bylaw, so as to have permission to build a 14 to 16-bed hospice facility at 597 Randolph Avenue, Milton, which property is located in a Residence C district. That section of the bylaw requires authorization of a special permit by the Board of Appeals to allow charitable or philanthropic uses, including hospitals and sanitariums which are not conducted for profit. My name is John Leonard. I'm Chairman of the Board of Appeals, and with me this evening is Board Member, to my immediate left, Board Member Brian Hurley, and to my immediate right is Board Member Attorney Frank O'Brien. The rules of the board are going to be the same as the first two hearings. We'll hear from the applicant, then we'll hear from persons who have questions of the applicant or wish to speak in support of the application, and then we'll hear from any person present who wishes to speak in opposition to the application, if any. We're tape recording the proceedings this evening, as always, so that we'd request that before anyone speaks, tell us your name and address. Speak up nice and clear and loud so we'll have an accurate record of the proceeding if we have to revert to the record in order to prepare a decision on this application. In addition to the advertisement, which I've summarized, we'll have in evidence at this particular hearing the March 4, 2013 application. We have a March 4th, 2013 denial letter by Mr. Prondak. We have a March 3rd, 2013 letter from Attorney McGettrick to Mr. Prondak enclosing the required materials and requesting the denial letter so that she could move on to the Board of Appeals. We also have a conceptual layout plan that's prepared by CA Engineering Services of Brockton, Massachusetts. It must be dated, but I don't immediately see the date. In any event, it shows the subject property and it shows the proposed hospice facility and shows the parking spaces and the like, and its relationship to Randolph Avenue and Reedsdale Road. So we certainly thank the applicant for providing those materials. We also received from the applicant a summary of the proposed application with extensive comment about the applicant and the use of the facility and some other technical aspects of the application, which I'm not going to get into. I assume Mrs. McGettrick and your consultants and engineers will get into these materials. But they've been on file with the board, so if any member of the public had wanted to look at this application in more detail, they've had the opportunity to do that. So I think without further ado, welcome back to the Board of Appeals, Mrs. McGettrick.
Thank you very much.
Good, we're delighted to hear from you.
Thank you. And so I am Marion McKettrick, and I'm the local attorney for Seasons Hospice Foundation, and they are the applicant for this special use permit for a hospice use at 597 Randolph Avenue. I've been working with Seasons since the end of October 2012. Initially, that was because they needed background about the site. They had seen the property advertised, and they thought it might be an interesting site for a hospice. Then once they had determined their interest in proceeding, they asked me to continue to work with them on this application for the Board of Appeals. My role basically has been to help Seasons get to know the town of Milton and to help them understand the zoning requirement in our bylaw. We have studied the site for a number of months and concluded that it is an ideal size for this 14 to 16 bed hospice facility. Ideal in the sense that this is the amount of space and can allow for the amount of parking that you need for such a facility, but also that the site is not so large that such a facility could be expanded substantially. So what you would get here is what you would expect to have in the future. This is as much as you could do in terms of the size of a hospice facility here. We've also determined that the best way to operate a hospice facility on this site would be as a charitable nonprofit use, because that approach protects the site from commercial development and ensures a low-impact, attractive use that will not have a negative effect on abutting residential neighborhoods. When working out the details of that approach, as well as reaching agreement on selling the land or buying the land from the Archdiocese, has taken a number of months, but we're here before you today having concluded that it is the best approach. We did begin this process before anything else by sitting down with abutters and with town officials to discuss these aspects of the application. What's the best way? Is a hospice something that people would be interested in seeing on this site? What might it look like, and what might the impact be? So tonight we'll provide a lot more detail on how this use would work on this site, and I'll also talk about the zoning requirements in more detail. The owner will be Seasons Hospice Foundation. This is a not-for-profit 501c3 corporation. Services in the facility will be provided by Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care of Massachusetts, LLC, a licensed hospice care provider. Because these services will be provided to all patients who need them, will usually be paid for by Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance, but will also be provided to patients without the ability to pay, the hospice use is a charitable use. In the Boston area, we've determined there is a great need for this type of residential hospice facility. There is nothing, no facility providing the type of services that this one will provide in the Boston area. This is basically hospice care, including medical support and palliative care in a very serene and comfortable atmosphere. For Milton residents, having such a facility nearby will be a great advantage because the family normally might provide this type of care, but when they can't, they would like a home-like facility and they would like to be nearby. So, in short, we feel the hospice facility proposed fulfills the requirements of the Milton zoning bylaw for a special use permit. The service provided is unique and needed. It will be provided without ability to pay. The owner will be a nonprofit corporation. And I will certainly be describing in more detail how we meet all of the other requirements of the zoning bylaw, as well as elaborating on this proposition. But I'd like to begin, if I could, by introducing the members of, I guess we call it the development team, everybody that I've been working with on this proposal. So with your permission, if I could make those introductions. First of all, we have Greg Grabowski from Seasons Hospice Foundation.
Welcome, Mr. Grabowski. Good to see you.
And behind me here is Kathy Bliss. She's a director of Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care of Massachusetts, LLC. Kathy's been at a number of meetings already in Milton. You may have seen her at Selectmen's meeting and Planning Board meeting. We have Tom Lewis, who is helping with the development process. And is it Boston Hospice LLC officially? Yes. They form an organization just to do this development process. We have Dan O'Neill from Condyne Associates, who's right behind me here. They are the engineering and architectural firm that's working on the project. And Mark Dibb, also from Condyne Associates. And have I left anybody out? Okay. So that's the team. It's not everybody. There are even more people, especially lawyers and that kind of thing, who are working behind the scenes. But we're going to do a presentation tonight, and we have a PowerPoint, which we're not going to follow step by step. It'll just be up on the screen as we go through things.
And we'd rather hear from your development team than a bunch of lawyers making
Exactly,
speeches.
and that's what we concluded thinking about it beforehand. As you can see, we've brought large-size drawings, renderings. We've brought a site plan, and I believe they're big enough so everybody should be able to see them who's sitting in the audience, and if someone's watching this on TV, they can see them as well. These actually were recently completed. We've been working with a sketch for several months that just shows the front of the facility. These are more accurate drawings that will show you, as you look at this building from each side, and you stand back from it and you're down the hill from it, what it will look like, how the scale will appear on the site, and what some of the architectural details of the building will be.
Are you going to be able to
doesn't mean-
present us with mini copies of these at some appropriate time? So
Yes,
we'll have them for the file.
They were recently completed, so I actually brought only a couple of extras, but we are going to give you copies, absolutely.
Thank you.
I think this is the only thing that isn't in your packet, your PowerPoint packet right now. So I guess we should begin. I gave you sort of a quick summary already. Do you want to start going through the PowerPoint, or?
Well, yeah, I think that Kathy should talk
Kathy,
about
I think, I think what we discussed before we came in here was that we would invite Kathy Bliss to come up, with your permission, to talk about hospice in general.
Oh, sure,
Just give
that's
an
what-
introduction.
That'd be wonderful.
Okay, so.
Ms. Bliss, why don't you come up here and maybe we can take one of the chairs with you. How's that? It's not going to be swivelly, but...
That's all right, I can
have this one.
I can
No,
adapt to
no,
that.
no, no, it'll be comfortable.
Thank you.
You sit right here and there's your microphone.
Yep, thank you. I think most everyone is familiar with the concept of hospice, but the Medicare hospice benefit really was intended to provide the opportunity for patients who have a life-limiting illness and a prognosis of 6 months or less to be able to determine the way they wanted to spend the last days of their lives. And although many people think of hospice as the art of dying, it really is about the art of living, and it's about how you spend those days. So we have the privilege of working with patients and families to develop a hospice plan of care that is the patients and families' plan of care. And so allowing them to determine exactly, what kind of treatments they would like to access or what kind of treatments they would like to forego. And really the goal of the hospice benefit is to keep patients in their homes, wherever their home is, whether it's a residential home or an assisted living facility or a long-term care facility. But there are times during the course of the terminal illness that patients experience pain and symptom management issues that can't be controlled in the home. And I will say that the vast majority of our patients do not want to go to the hospital. We can provide the inpatient level of care in a long-term care facility, but even a larger percentage of those patients don't want to go to a long-term care facility unless they're already a resident there. So we have this group of patients that kind of have slipped through the cracks. And although 95% of our patients are cared for in the home or their place of residence, there is that other percentage of patients who require sometimes short-term, and we can return them back to their homes, but they require short-term inpatient care, which is one of the 4 levels of hospice care, which is a higher level of care that allows us to provide more technical kinds of treatments for pain and symptom management, be it infusion therapy or medication management and frequent titration of medications to be able to control pain and symptoms, to keep the folks comfortable, because that is our goal, is to the 2 greatest things that people fear about the process of dying when you read all the literature, and it's been my experience, it's that they'll die alone or they'll die in pain are the 2 largest things that bother people. So this is really the solution to both of those. We can make sure that pain and symptoms are managed, as well as the fact that they can also be surrounded by their family. And we tried to create a very de-institutionalized setting, so it's much more home-like. It accommodates the families, allows the families to stay in the rooms with the patients. They're little suites. It has common areas typically that allow the patients and families to congregate in those areas and to provide support for one another. The families can provide support for one another as well. So the Commonwealth of Massachusetts promulgated regulations back in 2003 to allow freestanding inpatient facilities to be built across the Commonwealth, and this would be the 5th in Massachusetts. But there is nothing like this anywhere in the metropolitan Boston area. The closest one is up on the North Shore, there's one down on the Cape, there's one in Worcester, and there's one in Merrimack Valley, and there's another license out there somewhere, but we would be the 5th. And we would provide the care in as much of a home-like setting as we possibly could to support the patients and families, and also the hospice benefit makes provision for us to care for the families for 13 months after the death of a patient. So we continue to follow the families and provide support for the families in following the death of a loved one. But that would be our goal with the inpatient facility.
That's great. Thank you very much. Just let me ask you one question in terms of the seemingly very small percentage of facilities like this, which seems to be in substantial need. Are the other 4 operated by nonprofits and charities, or are they operated for profit?
Yep, they're all not-for-profit.
And so this is the only facility anywhere in the greater Boston area?
Yes. The closest one to here is the one in Danvers. Then there's one in Worcester. and there's another one on the Cape.
So once a patient
Merrimack
is
Valley.
admitted to the facility, presumably by their doctor, but maybe by the family, does the treating physician follow the treatment that you provide and the palliative care that you provide in this facility? Or do you have your own staff of doctors who tend to deal with those issues?
We would have our own physician that would make rounds on the patient on a daily basis. However, Seasons and our philosophy is very much that we want to keep the primary care physicians or whoever the attending physician is that's designated by the patient as their attending physician. So our physicians pretty much act in consultation with the attending physicians, whether it be an oncologist or a primary care physician or whoever is following the patient that they have designated as their physician, because we don't want to disrupt that relationship. They're long-standing relationships many times, but because of the geographical location of a place, the physician, it's not convenient for that physician to make rounds, but our physician acts sort of as a hospitalist, if you will, which is the most current concept of managing patients that are in facilities. So they would act as the caring for the patient and in consultation with the attending physician to manage the care. But ultimately, the goal would be to either, to allow the patient to die peacefully in the hospice house or to transfer them back home. So these are usually short-term, usually about 7 days is the average length of stay that a patient has in an
Oh, really? It's
inpatient
that short?
facility. It's that short. Mhm.
Is it
It's
fair to
not a
say, because I think Mrs. McGettrick pointed this out in some of the materials, because of the charitable nature of your business here, this facility is available to people who even cannot afford it or don't have access to either state or federal resources. Is that true?
Yes, the majority of our patients have the Medicare benefit, which probably about 90% of the patients. There are others that have Mass Health, and we care for those patients, and we have a wide variety of commercial contracts with all of the major commercial insurance organizations, so we can care for the patients. But we have never turned away a patient because of their inability to pay. And Seasons, as an organization, has given away $2.5 million worth of care. So we would never turn someone away because they couldn't pay or they didn't have insurance.
Do you anticipate having any relationship, informal as it may be, with Milton Hospital in terms of outreach for
Absolutely.
patients who may need your type of care?
Absolutely. And, in today's environment, healthcare environment especially with the advent of accountable care organizations or ACOs, that there are, actually incentives and rewards that are given to being able to make sure that the 3 goals are met, where it's, increased patient satisfaction, better outcomes, and cost efficiencies. And hospitals are measured on those, and anyone that's participating in the ACOs. And now that Milton Hospital is also associated with Beth Israel Hospital, we have an inpatient contract. We're one of the 2 hospices in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that has an inpatient contract with Beth Israel. So we can provide the inpatient level of care in that setting, but we can also take the patient from the hospital and move them into the hospice house, which then takes the patient off of their roles, essentially, and frees up the bed for other patients.
Sure, and if one of the patients, for whatever reason, needed some type of acute care that you were not able to provide conveniently at the hospice facility, presumably the Milton Hospital would be available to you.
Absolutely, yep. Yep.
true?
Yes, we can certainly, we would work collaboratively with them and want to do that.
Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. Brian Hurley, do you have any questions of Ms. Bliss?
Is there a typical annual percentage of the number of people that are in the facility that don't have Medicare or another source?
We are probably around 2% of the patients that don't have a payer source. We've been as high as 3%, but 2 to 3% of our patients.
Is the LLC that's the lessee, is that a not-for-profit entity as well? So it's a profit entity?
But did I read somewhere that any profit that's received gets back to the charitable organization?
Well,
That was my description of the Milton, I mean, of the Seasons Hospice Foundation.
Yes.
Which will be the owner. And generally, the way I described it was that any profits above the cost of
Of the
managing
operation
facility
cost, yep.
would go to the nonprofit and would have to be applied to the nonprofit's goals and purposes, which Greg Grabowski can get up and explain in a little
Okay.
bit more detail to you, but that
We'll
was-
stay out of Mr. Grabowski's area at the present time. You finished with your questions, Brian?
Yes.
Okay, do you have any questions, Frank, of Ms. Buss?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
These other 4 facilities that you've mentioned, could you put this proposed facility in context for me? Is this larger, smaller, about the same?
It's about the same. There are a couple that are larger, and there are a couple that are smaller. There's, the Danvers one is 20 beds, the one in Merrimack Valley is 18 beds, the one in Worcester is 10, and the one down on the Cape is 10.
Mr. Chairman, if I may continue.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you run other such facilities like this in the Commonwealth?
Seasons does not. In my previous life, I was one of the, had the privilege of designing and building and operating the hospice house in Danvers. So I've done it before, but Seasons does not have one in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, although we have 10 inpatient units across the country.
Typically, how do patients arrive at the facility?
A variety of different ways, some by ambulance, some by private car, but it's not an emergent kind of situation. There are, no sirens or anything like that. It's, some by chair cars, some by taxi cabs. It just depends on what the condition of the patient is.
Would you say that most arrive during normal business hours?
I would say that most arrive during normal business hours or into the early evening hours at the latest. Typically, that's when people are being transferred from one facility to another. I mean, there may be occasions when someone would have to be brought to the house in the middle of the night, but those would probably be the exceptions rather than the rule. When we admit patients to the hospital or to a long-term care facility for inpatient level of care now, most often that happens during the course of normal business hours.
Is it the same case when a patient's discharged?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. When the patient goes home, we want to get them at home, settled, making sure they have all the equipment and medications and everything that they need before the evening falls. So, yes.
Deliveries, pickups, service providers, normal business hours, or all hours of the day or night?
Well, normal business hours for deliveries, we would work with our vendors to make sure that the hours were conformed with what was appealing to the neighbors. And we want to be good neighbors. I mean, we absolutely want to be part of the fabric of the community. So we would want to work with the neighbors to make sure that the deliveries were made in a timely way. The staff, typically the staffing patterns are for 12-hour shifts, so that the staff is typically changing shifts at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning and 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. That is the most efficient way typically to staff.
And how many staff
Patient
people,
unit.
I'm sorry, Mr. O'Brien, let me just ask this, I'll forget it. How many
Sure.
staff people do you anticipate being on hand if your facility is substantially full?
Yeah, if it's substantially full, we would have a minimum of 2 people all the time. But there could be as many as, 6 to 8 people in the facility during the daytime if there's, because we have an interdisciplinary team that cares for the patients, so we have a social worker that would be coming in to visit with patients. We have chaplains that would be coming in, a physician, but we
I
would
think
have
I see a
minimum
couple of them
2.
now. You're going to keep Father Lynch somewhat busy, I think.
Oh, we
particularly
would
in the-
welcome that.
Well, I don't think you have to welcome.
We
I
would
think he'll be
welcome it.
there. But
Great.
let me just ask you, what, in terms of percentage of occupancy, would you normally anticipate over the years?
Well, we would be hoping for an 80 to 90% occupancy rate. There are sometimes when it's 120%, but
Sorry, Mr. O'Brien, do you have any further
Typically.
questions?
Defer at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mrs. McGetrick, the floor is yours again. Thank you, Ms. Bliss. We
Thank you
appreciate
very
you coming
much.
tonight.
Thank you.
Well,
I hope we didn't anticipate too many of your
No,
the
those
questions
are
in
all
your
good
presentation.
questions, and I'd almost like, I think we'll be going into details of how the site has been set up that relate to deliveries and things like that, so I won't
Perfect.
go into that right now. I could talk a bit about the site history.
Would you please, because I think that's important. I have to admit that I was somewhat unfamiliar with the rich history of this particular site and how it ties into what you're doing here.
Well, no question, we learned a lot about Howe House, which was the original building on this site, when the issue of demolition came up, and you know, the building was demolished. We're in a position now where we want to remember the site. We've certainly met with the Milton Historic Commission, but it's not just the Historic Commission that cares about this. I mean, lots of people in Milton care a lot about the history of the town and want to be able to remember what was here. What's significant about this site was certainly the architecture of the building. Somewhat, you know, we've tried to echo it somewhat in the design here with the peaked roofs and so forth. This is only a single-story building, however. Howe House was 2 stories. It was built with Quincy granite and uniquely shaped granite, triangular granite. So you don't find that granite today. So it's just very special. In addition, the residents of the original Howe House were kind of interesting. It was built by Joseph Howe in 1830, but his son Sam founded the Perkins School for the Blind, and his daughter Julia wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic. So there are 2 interesting historical facts associated with this building. And later on, of course, the house then became, many years later, it was the original rectory for St. Elizabeth's Church, and I believe church services were actually held over there before the church was built. So that's more recent history. What we've done is to go to the Historic Commission and ask them for ideas about ways to commemorate the history of the site. And it's an ongoing discussion right now. There are a bunch of different suggestions. They'd certainly like to see an historic marker on the site, maybe a granite marker, and I don't see that there would be a problem with that, but we would work it out with the commission as to what it would look like and where it would be, and in terms of the building design and everything. Other suggestions were that we display historic photos inside the building and maybe even have other memorabilia. Again, we've talked to Kathy Bliss, went to the meeting with me. She thought that was interesting and well worth pursuing. As far as the granite itself goes, there are, you know, the granite that's left on the site right now is mostly not really valuable granite. Some of the granite, at least one local firm has some of it and certainly would be willing to provide it if there was something we could do with it that would help commemorate the history. That, again, needs to be worked out with the architect and the company, and cost is a consideration. But the fact that we do have some of these pieces of granite apparently still in town, they're being kept safe, and you know, it's possible that there may be something we can do with them. So I guess my summary on the history is we've learned a lot about the history. Kathy Bliss and I particularly have spent a good amount of time with the Historic Commission, and although we can't resurrect the building, we feel that there are ways that we can commemorate the history, and I guess we'd kind of like, if this goes forward, we'd certainly like the blessing of the Board of Appeals on this concept of continuing to work on different methods of commemorating the history with the building and what's inside and what's around it. Any questions or?
No, why don't you?
I mean,
why
that's
don't
pretty
you
much
go
all
on?
I know right now. I think if there's more history, we'd love to hear it, so.
No more than we do, and
Yeah.
we appreciate your history lesson.
Okay.
I think it's significant in this application, as well as being interesting. So why don't you just proceed with your presentation?
Okay, we're going to talk about the building. Do you want me to talk about the site at all, or just go right into? Okay, yeah, because I think there's a lot of detail. I think neighbors would want to hear more, and we'll have questions. I'd rather spend, I know you have limited time, so if you would like to go ahead.
That's all right. It
Mark,
doesn't bother other
proceed.
people, so
Okay.
we'll sit here and we'll listen to as long as you want to make your
Thank you.
presentation.
All
If
right.
we don't finish this tonight, we'll come back another night, but I think we want to do our best to try to conclude the hearing this evening.
My name is Mark Dibb. I'm the civil engineer for the project
for CNA Engineering. I'm just going to describe the existing conditions a little bit further, go into the proposal, some of the technical details, how it meets the zoning requirements, and then I can cover the building itself a little bit. I know we've provided a lot of details in the drawing themselves, so we may not cover every aspect, but I'll try to hit the main points. The existing lot has a lot of historical significances. I won't go into that any further. It's an existing 1.42 acre lot in the Residence C zone. The site is located at the corner of Randolph and Reedsdale. To the south of the site is a mixed-use property. I believe there's some rental properties and commercial aspect to that site. To the southwest, there's a DPW building, and to the west of the property is some residential dwellings. Just touch base quickly on the utilities. The site was served by a sewer connection out in Reedsdale. There's also existing gas and water connections out in Randolph Ave.
And those are adequate utility hookups, is that true?
Correct. The facilities in the roads are adequate. There'll be new service connections to those points.
But you don't have to do a new sewer project in order
Correct.
to accomplish it.
Correct. So that's essentially the existing, and then the existing site did have a driveway off both Reedsdale and Randolph Ave to serve the building that was on site. The proposed project consists of the 12,500 square foot hospice facility. Again, it's 14 to 16 bed facility. The building is located with the main front entrance facing Randolph Avenue, so therefore, in zoning purposes, Randolph will be the frontage of the project, with Reedsdale being a side yard per the zoning, and the southern side being a side yard, with the westerly side being the rear yard setbacks. The building does comply with those setbacks. It fits within the required building setbacks. We're providing 38 parking spaces at the front of the building. We're providing landscape screening in between the roadway and that parking area, as well as to the south corner end of the building is the service and loading area. In that same vicinity is a emergency generator just for power outages and things like that, and it'll only run the emergency systems. Go ahead. Unless, if,
This is the main entrance, this is the service loading area, so it's in the same general area.
if I, can this move around? Because I could go up and point.
No, no, please.
We also do have extra boards if they can be put somewhere
Oh, I
else.
think we're fine. Everyone can see the plans, can they not? Okay, why don't you continue, Mr. Dib?
There is a second, the major traffic entrance to the project is on the Randolph Ave side towards the southern end of the project. That is the major entrance to the project. We have provided a access out onto Reedsdale for emergency vehicles only, and that'll have a gate across that under usual conditions. It'll be gated and will not be providing access.
Thank you very much. We're a little deficient in audio services. Thank you. Remember to carry that around with you, Mrs. McGettrick, so everyone will know what you're saying.
Thank you.
The site, the new building, will continue to have utilities provided in the same manner. The sewer will go north up to Reedsdale, the connections. The water line, a domestic water line, and sprinkler line will come off the Randolph Ave side, as well as gas connections will be off of Randolph Ave. A new stormwater management system will be incorporated into the site, which will manage pre- and post runoff rates. It'll meet the town's requirements for stormwater.
Chairman, if I may.
Of course. Mr. O'Brien has a question.
provision, on the stormwater management side of things, the provisions for snow removal, snow storage, or anything like that?
We can identify snow storage areas, but we will provide adequate snow storage areas.
Is the site adequate to accommodate reasonable snow storage?
Yes.
There's room there that you can
Yep.
accommodate. Okay. Mr. Brown, do you have any follow-up questions there?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
And lastly, there's just regarding fencing, along the westerly property line, there's an existing solid white vinyl fence, and we're proposing to continue the same style white vinyl fence around the southwesterly side and southern side of the property, yes. And that'll be a solid fence. One of the renderings shows more of a picket style, but it's proposed to match what's there, which is a solid fence. So, and then the landscape plan, as you see, has been prepared by a registered landscape architect to provide some screening of the parking lot, as well as we provided a few plants up at the northwest corner to screen the back area of the building up at the top there. Top left corner.
Top left corner.
Off Reedsdale.
There you go.
Yes, and just to touch base on the architecture of the building, it is in general a Cape-style building. It is a one-story building. The height of the major roof line is approximately 30 feet. It's intended to be within zoning requirements on building height. Each patient room, if you see on the site plan, the patient rooms are out on the ends of the wings. Will have its own patio area. We'll have some recessed lighting up above it. There will be some, again, onto lighting, there'll be some additional pole lights in the more residential style pole lights, not the large box commercial type lights. But we do intend to provide a full photometric plan that will show that lighting is not overflowing into neighboring properties and will meet the town zoning requirements.
Is that part of your presentation this evening?
A photometric plan is not,
No.
but the fact that we intend to meet zoning.
Okay, and you also intend that the lighting from the proposed facility not adversely affect the
Correct.
neighborhood?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And there is a mechanical HVAC equipment is proposed to be in the rear of the building on a rooftop, screened by architectural screening around that to cut down on noise from the facility. There is also a patio in the back as an amenity to the users. The utility room and sprinkler rooms are on that southern end of the building, near the service area. In general, that is if you want to provide.
I mean, the general feel is we want to keep it as residential as possible, but yet it is a commercial use, but have it be soft and blend in with the neighborhood. Thus, we're not going to light it, extensively, or with a lot of floodlands or downlight or anything like that. We want it to be soft and blend in with the neighborhood.
Mrs. McGettrick, is Mr. Dibb going to discuss the parking issue, or is some other expert going to do that?
Whoever.
Who would like to? We have a description of the parking, and we'd like to explain, first of all, that in order to develop our parking plan, we had preliminary meetings with all department heads, especially police and fire, DPW, and our initial plan had a lower amount of parking. It was a sketch, but they all said they would, and Kathy Bliss herself said, we'd like to put some more parking spaces in. So we've actually provided much more parking in this final plan, and it exceeds any of the standards. But do you want to talk about that a bit more?
Sure. I mean, we prepared a slide that points
Yep.
to it. See that the code exceeding the code.
Talking about a state code?
Yes, there is no code for Milton, but there is a state code. And then
Well, there's a standard, it's not a code. It says whatever the Board of Appeals
Yeah, the Board of-
determines would be reasonable under the circumstances.
Exactly. So what we did, since we didn't have, you know, a standard measure for a hospice, was we looked at the Department of Public Health
Right.
and what they might advise or require. We looked at other hospice facilities, and we talked to the director of hospice here, who has planned other hospice facilities. And this was the result, and then we exceeded, actually,
Yeah.
what was recommended. So
Yeah, but I guess the point to take away is that we're exceeding it.
See, Department of Public Health says you'd have to have .25 spaces per bed in the hospice. In other words, for every 4 beds, you have to have 1 space. Well, clearly, we didn't think that was sufficient, but that would be the minimum that they would require. And they do get involved in the specifics of the site design in their licensing. So we've provided 2 spaces per bed for visitors and employees, 8 spaces for staff, and 2 additional spaces, and we have the requisite number of handicapped access spaces. So our actual parking is 2.71 spaces per bed versus the minimum from DPH of .25.
Well, that's interesting, because I don't know what's adequate parking for hospice use, and I did take a look at some of the standards, though
This is
not proximate to the Boston area, and they usually provided 1 space per bed, and then 1 space for the maximum, the largest number of employees that you'd have on site at any one time. And so if, I think Ms. Bliss said 8 or 10 people,
Right.
you know, so that's 26 spaces, and you're providing
38.
38.
I mean, we thought, most people who've looked at that have said that you probably won't use all those spaces. I think everybody agrees that it's better to plan for too much than for too little. And we definitely don't want, on this location, to have people trying to park in the street. So that's the reason that this
Right.
many spaces have been provided. They do fit in the front. They don't have to be put anywhere else on the site, and we think it works, but.
Yeah, and again, it's, you know, coming off of Randolph, because the other entrance is gated, so you only have 1 entrance.
And so they're away from the residential
That's right.
portion of the area.
Correct.
And I presume that most people would be using the parking spaces, but correct me if I'm wrong. There would be perhaps in the morning or in the evening to visit patients, maybe around noontime, and that's when you'd be planning for maximum use.
Yeah, I don't really know about that.
Mrs. Bliss maybe could correct us. I mean, I know when we've talked about this at other meetings, a hospice is different from most other uses because there isn't one particular type of flow. You know, traffic comes and goes. People come, they might stay with, if your husband is there, you might stay with him overnight. You might come in the middle of the morning or the middle of the afternoon. There isn't a particular time that you have to be there. I don't believe there are visiting hours, as there are in a hospital. What that means then is that the traffic flow is not really heavy at any particular time. It's just intermittent. So is there any particular time that it would be heavier? Would you want to address that? Or?
I'm happy to.
Sure, we'd be delighted to hear from you. Go ahead, Ms. Bliss.
No, actually, I think you did a very nice job, Marion, of saying that it does ebb and flow at different times, and it will all depend. It depends sometimes if there's a very large family and people are gathering. It depends, but there's really no specific visiting hours. There's no specific time that, you know, we would see increases in traffic flow. It's very individual based on the patient population that we have and what the availability is. And as she articulated, that many times patients' families will come and stay overnight. So they will park and remain in the room with the patient, even for the entire duration of their stay.
Good, thank you. Marion, could I ask you just one additional question? And I don't mean to put Father Lynch or St. Elizabeth's
Father Walsh, yeah.
on the spot here, so you don't have to say anything, Father. But has the facility considered possibly having some informal arrangement with St. Elizabeth's that if there was an overflow for whatever reasons, that maybe a small portion of that parking lot that fills up on Sundays could be available for these visitors on an informal basis?
We haven't had any formal discussions about that. We all know that, you know, there's a large parking lot across the street. We would have to work out an arrangement if we felt it would become necessary, and that's entirely up to St. Elizabeth's Church as to whether they would be in agreement. When we talked about parking initially with the department heads, the first thought was, because they're looking at whatever we had, 16 spaces, well, maybe you could get more parking across the street, because nobody knew whether more parking could be provided on site. And our first approach, and our approach at present, is to provide for the parking that we need on the site. And so that's what we've done. We feel that we have more than enough here. So we're not asking right now.
No, I
But we
understand.
do recognize that St. Elizabeth's Church has a large parking lot. So, you know, I suppose it's one way of thinking of the site, that
Right,
we
if
could
Father Lynch
talk
is going to be
about it.
visiting your site, maybe some of your people can visit his site.
We could
at
talk
some
about it, and it
appropriate
could
time.
work both ways. And,
Right.
you know, certainly, we would be cooperative, but we can't presume necessarily that that's going to be available. So we felt that we had to provide what we needed right on the site.
I'm sorry. Okay, that's good. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any question on the parking issue, so we can kind of move on to other issues?
No.
Okay. Thank you. So why don't you continue with your presentation, Marion?
Where are we? What haven't we addressed?
Yeah.
Well, we certainly
Yeah,
haven't
we
had
should-
Greg
yeah, we need to talk-
Grabowski
yeah,
come
Greg
up,
needs
and
to
I
talk
would like
about
to invite him to come up, because the owner of this facility will be Seasons Hospice Foundation, and Mr. Grabowski is going to describe what that foundation is and a little bit about how the management would work.
Do
And-
you want to talk about the foundation first?
Yeah, sure. So very quickly, Seasons Hospice Foundation, because I know it's getting a little late. We are an independent 501c3 charitable corporation. We are nationwide. We are licensed in all the states, including here the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as a charity, and also licensed to solicit charitable funds. Our mission, first and foremost, is to help patients and families at the end of life, and we do that around the country. Secondarily, and I'll kind of go back to these a little bit and give you quick examples of how we do help patients and families. Secondarily, we have what we call special programs that we do, children's grief camps, outreach into the community. We're very excited to do community education, talk about what an inpatient unit does, what hospice does, what palliative care does, reach out to the community on tough discussions related to end-of-life care, because that's really what our mission's all about. We also do what I think is very exciting is an extension beyond Medicare and Medicaid. I think we've all had health care and we wonder, wow, if I could just have this little extra piece, this would be wonderful. Well, that's what the foundation is here for. So in hospice, things like massage therapy, acupuncture, alternative methodology is what we're all about. And then also we do what we call applied research. So research that shows the benefit of hospice and different clinical modalities that may help Kathy do what she does. We're very excited to be the owner. The real connection for us is we believe as the owner, Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care will focus on what they're really great at, which is care for patients and families. I think they have a great track record at doing that. And what we have a great track record is extending outside the benefit. So things that we do for potential families that are going to be at the inpatient unit, and a lot of times you have families that are potentially in crisis. Length of stay, as Kathy talked about and Marion talked about, would be very short. So one of the things that the foundation kind of sponsors and puts in place is something called the Legacy Project, where that gets families to reflect, work through some of the tough dynamics of their loved one dying. A lot of folks don't necessarily realize that that's happening. Legacy Project helps people work through it, brings closure, that kind of thing. Children's grief camp, other community outreach. I think the thing that what you'll get from a hospice perspective is you'll get the best of both worlds. So you're going to get some special treatment on the other complementary side, as well as then the clinical side, which is what Medicare and Medicaid pay for. Our outreach to patients and families can be something as simple as assisting folks getting to the facility because they may not have transportation. Sometimes when we go into residential settings at people's homes, they don't have food. So our social workers, the foundation, we work collaboratively to get food in the home, and then the social worker works to get them onto future assistance. So we really see ourselves as a niche when patients and families are struggling, need some kind of assistance, need some kind of support, need some emotional support, as well as we work collaboratively on the grief support side as well. So we really see ourselves as a really good collaborative partner. As an owner, we're very excited for the opportunity to put both of these entities together. I think the benefit will be wonderful for patients and families. The service, I think, they will find will go above and beyond. I think it gives an opportunity for the foundation to introduce itself to the greater Boston community, and especially, obviously, here in Milton. And as Kathy said and Marion said, we look to be great neighbors. And it's really, our mission is all about outreach. So we're very excited. We will come over and meet Father. And I went to a Catholic all-boys school, and so I'm very excited to come over. And I think there's a lot of collaborative spirit that we would bring. We would certainly want to meet with all the different community partners, and that's really our mission. So our mission is all about the support. So we're excited about the opportunity to own the facility. And to answer an earlier question, revenue will only allow us then to do more for future patients and families.
Okay, great. Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. O'Brien, do you have questions?
I do, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just want to get this straight in my own head, because one of the fundamental pieces that's in the special permit is charitable purposes. So I just want to get straight in my own head who's who here. So Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care, they're going to be the operator, correct? Is Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care, they're the LLC?
They are. They will have a lease with the owner, and the lease will specify a charitable hospice operation. I mean, there'll be lots of other detail in the lease as well.
Okay.
And I understand why you're asking the question. When we first began talking about this, the first thing Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care Massachusetts LLC, the first thing Kathy Bliss explained to me was that although they are a for-profit operation, they're about as close to a not-for-profit operation as you can be, and that they are a charitable. They do provide charity care, and they do serve a charitable function. So you have an in-between situation here in terms of the types of organizations that you're dealing with. And then you have a bifurcated ownership management. You're right. I mean, you have a nonprofit owner. You have an operator that is a for-profit entity. It's an LLC. And you have care that's going to be provided within this facility that is charitable care, and I've studied it very carefully, and I would argue strongly that it will qualify as charitable care.
And you're requiring that as a
And
term
that is a
and condition of
requirement.
the lease.
Yes, and that's a requirement, but we couldn't bring the application as an application for a special use permit with the LLC as the owner, because it's not a nonprofit. And an LLC can't, even if it tried to be a nonprofit, it doesn't qualify for all of that. Although it's the zoning that we're concerned about, not the tax benefit, which is the reverse of most cases you see in this area.
My
Most of
question is in
time
the
they're
zoning
arguing.
context.
Yes. So go ahead. So you're saying who is, all right, I lost the question then. So I haven't answered your question yet.
Who's who here? I mean,
Well, who's who is Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care Massachusetts, LLC, will be the tenant. They will provide the services. And Seasons Hospice Foundation will own the facility and will have the lease and will be leasing the facility for the use as a hospice to Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care, LLC.
is this type of arrangement common in this industry?
I don't know if it's common in this industry. I think.
Ms. Bliss is nodding in the
Yeah,
background.
all right, I'll let Kathy answer it. I certainly can.
My experience has been mostly on the hospital side of this, but quite frequently, the hospital, a not-for-profit entity, that I worked for 30 years, would own the property and then lease it to a for-profit organization to run and to operate the services. So getting the experts essentially to, provide a service that may not be like a core hospital service. For instance, a nursing home. The hospital built the nursing home and then would lease it to a for-profit management company to come in and run the operation. And that was very commonplace in the hospital world.
And did those leases usually contain a restriction which required the
Absolutely.
operation of the facility to have a charitable component?
Absolutely.
And to take people who can't afford services?
Absolutely, yes.
Typically, what's the term in years of the lease?
Well, it depends. I guess in this situation, we've yet to actually discuss the term.
Right.
That's really not even.
Well, let me put the context of the, let me give you the context of the question. Typically in this town, and Mr. Chairman, correct me if I'm wrong, our special permits last for a term of years. And we require the special permittees to come back in periodically in order to renew that special permit. I think that it would be important, at least important to me, to have that special permit and the lease arrangement, at least in some fashion, be coordinated, because I would be concerned about another lessee coming in, which could potentially cause us some issues.
Well, right, I think we certainly, the owner has the right to lease to whomever it wants to, but we certainly have the right and maybe the obligation to require that that lease have a charitable component to it, so that the purpose of the bylaw is being fulfilled. And while we're not going to be writing leases for you folks, I think Mr. O'Brien is right. We could certainly limit the special permit to 3 to 5 years or something like that. Require there be an operating entity that the lease for the operating entity has a charitable condition in it, and that condition remain in full force and effect while this facility is operating. And we're not interfering with your business, we're
Right.
just ensuring that the representations that you make are going to continue to be fulfilled.
Sure.
If you change an operating
Well,
entity for
I
whatever.
would just say, we have a board of trustees that we answer to, and so this has been vetted with them, and it's our intent to provide a lease arrangement for Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care for an inpatient unit, and that fulfills our mission of what we're doing, along with the complementary components that I described earlier. So anything outside of that would violate our mission and would not go with our bylaws, and I'm sure would violate our 501c3 status, along with our governance clauses and our bylaws.
Okay, and then the for-profit entity that's running the place with a charitable component, charitable restriction, would take the extra profits that you're able to charge on the lease because they're a for-profit. That comes back to your foundation to
Correct.
be used for additional charitable
Correct.
purposes.
So ostensibly, you have Kathy providing all of the clinical care, and you have Greg and the foundation providing all the community outreach, the wishes, the extended benefit, special programs, all of the different components that I talked about. So that's really, and we are the owner leasing it to them. It's not in our mission to actually do clinical care. It's actually in our bylaws. Our bylaws say, do everything that we can for patients and families outside of the clinical component. And their focus is the clinical. So I do think between both of the entities, you get, frankly, a very focused and excellent care and very focused kind of community outreach and a benefit for patients and their families.
And that is our only focus. That's our only mission, is to provide hospice care. That's all we do.
Mr. O'Brien, do you have any further questions on this issue or any other issue?
Yes, but I'll defer
Okay.
at this point in time.
All
Can
right,
I ask, do you
Mr. Hurley,
have
please.
a lease that you could show us that contains this so-called charitable restrictive language? Or could you tell me what it's going to say?
We cannot produce one right this moment. We don't have.
Right, but you could,
But there's no others, no other examples around the state that have had a similar arrangement that you're aware of? Probably because they didn't have to deal with this zoning
We have
provision.
access to, I mean, the terms of it, sure, I mean,
I'm trying to get a sense. Does it say you will take every single patient who can't come, who has no money, no matter what percentage of your beds that may take up? I'd be surprised
Well,
if
you'll
it
make
said
it
that.
available to them, not that you'll necessarily take them. You may not have the ability to.
We've talked about this issue a lot. I understand what you're trying to grapple with, and the language has been very consistent coming back to me from Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care Massachusetts, LLC, and it's the language which is incorporated in some of this PowerPoint and probably in that memo that I wrote, which is that they will not turn a patient away because of lack of resources. Now, the lease isn't complete. There's some draft lease language that's been prepared. What we can do is to prepare language and subject to your approval or something that relates to that issue of how care will be provided, or what the definition of charitable care will be, something like that.
We could incorporate it as a condition in any special permit that we grant, so there's no question as to what the language is going to provide.
But I would want to see it
Well, of
before I voted in favor of
It's
of the-
not
of
an
the proposal.
unanticipated request, I can tell you that. We have talked about it. We just didn't come to you with the language to do it.
Let me tell you my perspective on this. I'm not really too concerned about the entities. I think that's important if you were before the Appellate Tax Board. I don't think it's important when you're in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, because the issue is not the nature of the entity, it's the nature of the use. And so you can have a clearly charitable entity performing non-charitable uses, just like Regis College thought that they are an educational facility, but they couldn't do the proposal that they wanted to have people living on the campus and taking a couple of courses every now and again. So I'm concerned about the nature of the use.
Exactly.
And so I wouldn't feel comfortable voting in favor of this until I see exactly what that lease is going to say and how charitable this use is really going to be.
I understand. So beyond what I've told you already to describe what charitable use is, and I tried to find, I provided you with a case, there's others, but, just to give you a flavor of how the analysis seems to occur in a legal context. What is a charitable use? And the charitable use is a use, it isn't just a use it's not necessarily a use that's provided the way Seasons says it does, which is that it takes patients who can't pay. But it is a use, it has to be a use that's provided to all of our population. It can't exclude people because it's so expensive or so exclusive, so dear that a lot of people in the population can't take advantage of it. So first and foremost, Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care Massachusetts LLC provides services to everybody who needs them, and the services are paid for by Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance. And in addition, they do something extra, which is that they will take a patient who does not have any resources, who doesn't, for some reason, have access to Medicare or Medicaid, for example. That's even more than is necessarily in the concept of charitable care. But the other aspect of charitable care is it a unique type of care or a unique type of thing that is provided that isn't generally available and is needed? A charity isn't just a hospital or a medical service. It can be all kinds of things. And those are the elements of charitable care that are described, at least in the case that I provided to the board. And on each basis, I was able to look at Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care LLC, and I'm talking about the operator here, not the owner, and say that they do provide care that is charitable care, and their care is unique. It's kind of hard to explain. I'm not sure how well everybody understands that, and I didn't understand it in the beginning, but some hospices just provide sort of residential care for their patients. Seasons Hospice provides more than residential care. They provide additional medical care, and they provide specialized types of care to, remediate pain. They provide all kinds of therapy that other hospices don't. For example, they provide music therapy, which is very unusual, but it happened to come up in a discussion that we had at one meeting. And it's a whole field. The idea of using music therapy in a hospital or a hospice setting. So those are elements of the uniqueness of the care. Then there's the question of need. It has to be something that's needed. And there is no facility providing this type of care right now in this general immediate Boston area, and certainly there's nothing in Milton. And so there is, and there is a need, and I would have to say that it's a recognized need because people in the town seem to be saying anecdotally that they would like to have hospice care available. I mean, this is just now that they know that the application is in, you kind of get, I'm getting that kind of feedback, but it's very anecdotal. And finally, there is the element of, additional element of providing care to those who can't pay for it at all, which is clearly charity care. So on those bases, the care that's provided by the operator, who is an LLC and not a not-for-profit, is charitable care. And I feel that's probably, I agree with you, I think that's the fundamental part of this application, that care is charitable care. But in addition to that, the decision was arrived at to try to provide a nonprofit owner, and in fact, it's turning out to be a very interesting relationship now proposed between Seasons Hospice Foundation and then the operator, because they've seen a number of ways that this can actually help the foundation grow in its purposes. There were other reasons for that as well. I mean, we're very desirous of meeting the requirements of the zoning, and we do not want to apply for a variance or go for a change in the zoning. And there's a very, very strong desire on the part of the neighborhood that this not become a commercial site. It's a site that people have looked at for commercial use because there's commercial entity on one side. It's a busy, heavy traffic intersection, and it's very visible. But there are two neighborhoods on two edges. They're quiet residential neighborhoods, and they feel it would be a catastrophic change for the neighborhood if this were to become a commercial site. So this application really has become a vehicle that we hope can provide a use that doesn't have the impact that a commercial use would have, and that isn't a commercial use, and that it's done under the existing zoning, not changing the zoning to open the way somehow to some other type of commercial use. Those are all the motivations for coming to you with the application in this form. And we'll try to provide every bit of information we can to show you that we comply with that requirement, but we also certainly would like feedback from you if there's more that you need or if there's something different that you need.
Right. I think the question that Mr. Hurley is saying is he'd like to see more specificity as to what the lease is going to require. And then the question becomes, we can discuss this.
Well, there's from the Seasons Hospice Foundation as the owner, as a 501c3, we're a transparent nonprofit. And so there will be a certain level of public documents that will be available as it relates to our lease arrangement. And I would also add, as it relates to charity care, the owner would not do business with the LLC unless they supplied care to every single patient that comes to them. The owner does work with the operator collaboratively around the country. They have a wonderful reputation of serving absolutely every patient that comes. And then also, since we're a national organization, we do take a look at statistics. The amount of folks that don't qualify for Medicare, Medicaid, or have private insurance or some kind of assistance, it's a very, very, very small. So as it relates to the hospice benefit, I know that we hear about traditional health care and lots of gaps. The hospice benefit is a little bit different. So the amount of patients that potentially have no coverage is very small, and we would not, as the owner, work with an operator unless there was an absolute 100% guarantee. Again, our mission is to take care of everybody. So unless that's fulfilled on the clinical side, then we would not do business with those folks. And we have language that relates to that kind of our discussion with our trustees as it related to this relationship.
Right. I think the issue seems to be, I don't think the board quarrels with the concept, and I think everyone thinks it's an admirable concept. I think the board is looking for assurances that the lease won't contain one sentence that is difficult to interpret. I think the board is looking for some type of assurance that the not-for-profit is going to be required to utilize in part this facility for charitable purposes, and how that's going to be articulated in the lease. And I guess the question then is, if you assume that's what you're going to do, does the board want to have that language and say we like this or we approve of it prior to voting on the particular application, or require it as a concept and make sure that the particular language suits that purpose? And I think, do you want to address that? You seem, Brian, to be concerned that you want to approve the language before you vote on it.
I do, and it may be that Marion needs to do some more persuading of me on the law, because, again, I think your comments are focusing on the nature of the organizations. You're not focusing on the nature of the use. And so the way I look at it is for it to be a charitable use, not a charitable organization. And in effect, the way you describe it, it may be that the for-profit could be viewed as a charitable entity because they're fulfilling those purposes that you mentioned. But is the use charitable? And I'm struggling with the notion that a facility that will at most offer 2 to 3% of its beds on an annual basis to people without means it means that it's the charity is the primary or dominant purpose of the use, and that's what I think the law is.
The definition of charity isn't that the service is provided for free.
The case you cite, to me, is completely an opposite. It's an ATB case. The issue was whether the entities were charitable, not whether the use was charitable. So here the question is the use charitable? And please understand me, I think this is a wonderful proposal. Well conceived. I think there's a great need. I think it's a good site. I'm just a little bit of a purist sometimes on zoning law, seeing that it's what I do for a living.
I know that, so I'm listening.
And so
Yeah.
I'm just struggling with this whole notion. And perhaps the best thing to do tonight is to hear from some other people. I mean, I assume that there's people in the audience that have something to say about this. So, but I might take some additional persuasion on the legal issue. But I'd like to hear what some of the neighbors have to say if they have anything to say.
Okay.
That's fine, and I mean, I was going to say on the specific issue of the lease that, of course, we can provide the language that refers to that restriction, but your question seems to be broader than that.
I think it is.
And I'd be happy to
Well, if
hear more from you on that at some point, but I
Let me ask
understand.
you a question, Marion. I don't mean to prolong the issue, but if you look at Milton Hospital, for example, I'm not in the Board of Trustees. I don't know very much about the hospital. And I guess my question is what percentage of pure charitable patients did they see at Milton Hospital? And they're a well-recognized charity. It's a distinguished institution. I mean, do they have more than 2 or 3 or 4% of people who are pure charity cases there? Most of the people would be Medicare, Medicaid, have other private insurance, and yet it's still a charitable hospital. So to take the concept that this has to service 40 or 50% of people who are impoverished and who can't pay the bills would be imposing a stricter standard on this hospice facility than perhaps another charitable hospital. But I don't know the facts.
Right, and not to belabor then, but one of the things we could supply you with are then the statistics of what the foundation does. So the foundation views this not only as a community outreach opportunity and a partnership opportunity for great care, but it will generate revenue for us to continue to do our mission.
Right, but Mr. Hurley's problem is not with the charitable foundation. I think it's with the operating entity and what the language of the lease is going to provide. So the nature of that service is, quote, charitable.
Yeah, there's 2 ways to
The
approach
nature
it.
of the use. Is the nature of the use. Is that the primary and dominant purpose of the use? Charity. That's the test under the law.
So are you saying that more than 50% of the people in this institution need to be charity cases in order to operate a hospice?
I don't have a specific figure. And I don't know how Milton Hospital's operating. Are they there under a special permit?
I mean,
under this
hospitals,
section of the bylaw? I doubt it.
Oh, I doubt it either.
Right.
But they're in a residential zone, and they're always here for a special permit if they have to change a screen in the hospital.
Right.
And the neighborhood there is particularly zealous, so. It's an interesting issue. I'm not sure we know.
There's 2 levels to your question, because on the first hand, the owner will be a nonprofit charitable entity. No question about that.
That will serve, we've already touched over 1,000 folks around the country in different ways, so there's that impact. So there would certainly be a touch impact.
The relationship that we're describing here, where a charitable entity like that has a lease or a license with an organization that will provide services that are related to their goals, but they don't provide direct services for that charity. That type of relationship, again, the only way you see it, when you look for these cases, you find them under IRS, revenue rulings, or you find the state tax department. And I understand what you're saying. You're right. That case that's where it came from. But in the context of that case, they talked about what a charitable use was, and that's what my 4-part analysis was. In the case of the IRS cases, it's becoming more common to see, and they are beginning to allow them more frequently, to allow that type of relationship. I'm not an expert on IRS law. Far from it. I just happen to have to look at this a little bit in order to try to acquaint myself with. I do know that the lawyers at Seasons Hospice Foundation and Seasons Hospice LLC have been looking at this issue, and they feel that this is an appropriate relationship. But that's not enough for you. I mean, I can't just tell you they've decided it works in terms of being a charitable.
Right, but what you're really saying here is if some person who doesn't have Medicare, Medicaid, and is otherwise impoverished under federal guidelines, call it what you will, if they seek hospice care, this entity, the operating entity, can't say no and can't discriminate against them because they don't have family money, neighbor support, Medicare, Medicaid, or anything else.
Right.
They have to accept that person if there's a space available.
Now, there are other hospices across the country that do not do that. I mean,
they're
this is
not
not, necessarily typical of a hospice that it offers care on that basis. I think it's a rather unique, characteristic, I guess, of this particular service that they provide. So I understand the question you're asking. I can try to get more information for you. I certainly can get information from the organization to say, amplify or flesh out what we have explained tonight in terms of how they actually operate. In terms of case law and, guidance, I can try to find more, but I can tell you that my analysis is coming from 2 directions. One is, yes, looking at something like Milton Hospital. Milton Hospital is a unitary entity. I mean, it doesn't lease out its operation to someone else, but a lot of hospitals are doing that now. But what Milton Hospital does is they have to provide, I don't know exactly how it works, the state requires that they take patients, for example, in the emergency room who can't pay. And that's a big burden on hospitals, but they have to do it if they're a certain type of hospital. And so that's, I assume, is an element of what constitutes their charitable care. Well, nobody is forcing the hospice to take those patients. What they're telling you is that they will take patients like that. They will take them as they come, and they will care for them, and that is what they have always done. That's the history.
That's in the usual course of business. There's
Exactly.
no definition that a third of your patients have to be impoverished and charitable.
No, and that's why I said I think Seasons Hospice LLC is somewhat unusual in that they are for-profit, but they provide care on this basis.
Let me ask you this
It's
question,
charity
and I
care.
don't know the answer to it, and it may be a silly question. But when Beth Israel Deaconess in Boston acquired the hospital, do you know, I think they acquired the site as well. Did they acquire title to that site? And if they did, is the entity that's operating there the same entity that's operating in Boston, or did they actually execute a lease with a new entity, Milton Hospital of Beth Israel Deaconess of Milton? And if so, does that lease have conditions in it that may be helpful to this particular problem? I don't know the answer.
I can't answer the question. I know they've merged. They've completely merged. But I don't know what the structure of their merger is.
For tax and corporate reasons, there may be a technical subsidiary there that's operating under a lease, but I don't know the answer to that. And apparently nobody in the audience does either, so I don't see any hands. And, Mr. O'Brien, do you want to weigh in on this? You've been silent for too long. Or do you want to proceed with the hearing and we can come back to this issue if we,
Well, just a couple of things. First of all, Marion, I congratulate you and thank you because you got on the record something that I wanted to be on the record, and that is that the approach that you have taken as a petitioner is designed to preserve as much of the current zoning bylaw and the current zoning of that particular site as possible. I'm not sure what the answer is with Brian's question relative to charitable. Is it just enough, a nonprofit operator being, is that enough of a charity? I don't know. My concern is going forward, and not to cast aspersion on your client or the petitioner here, is I would be concerned if on down, sometime in the future, all of a sudden this gets turned into a commercial enterprise. Now, you could make all sorts of arguments that it's not going to turn into a nursing home or something like that because it's a change of use. And that's my issue. It's the non-commercial nature of the use that's going on at that particular site because the neighborhood has had a long history of being very concerned, as you well know,
Right.
about commercial uses in that general area. So I'm sensitive to that.
So is there a way to control that by the way that a special permit is written, or are you saying there's some fundamental difficulty with trying to do that? I understand the problem. I think we've been looking at it all along.
Yes.
That's why we're here.
I think that the way that the special permit is constructed and whatnot is going to be something that will be taken into consideration. The whole charitable issue is something that needs to be taken into consideration, but it's all the commercial use and impact on that.
and I think, just 1 second, sir, let's finish this colloquy and we'll come back to you. So you certainly should be able to provide us with a memo, more particularly delineating the issues and perhaps suggesting some language that would be incorporated in the lease of the operating company that would give my colleagues and me comfort as to that there is a bona fide and maybe substantial charitable element to this, or at least a requirement to accept charitable patients without discrimination, and they won't be emphasizing the profit aspects to the disadvantage of charitable folk who may need this type of care. And if we obviously receive that substantially in advance of the next hearing, that could be very helpful.
It would.
It's part of the board's job here is to put into print the good intentions of any petitioner.
So let's do this. Do you have any other technical witnesses you want to provide, Mrs. McGettrick, or have you completed your presentation substantially?
I believe we have substantially completed it. We're certainly able to answer questions, but I know you want to hear from people who are here.
We do. Let me just make sure. Mr. Hurley, do you have any further questions of the applicant, or should we move on?
Not for the moment.
Okay.
I'd like to hear what
And
other
Mr.
people have to
O'Brien.
say.
Okay, Mr. O'Brien says we want to move on. The gentleman in the blue coat there, did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I have a comment.
Well, if it's going to be making a on the charitable nature of things here?
Actually, no, on a couple of other matters.
Okay, then why don't you have a seat and we'll hear from you in 2 seconds, unless you have to leave and go home or something. Okay.
Can I say something about the charitable nature?
Of course. Tell us who you are and.
My name is Patricia Boyd. I'm an RN BSN. I live in 22 Aldred Road, which is right at the corner of that white fence where you're going to be ending that neighbor's property and starting their new fence.
Sure, welcome to the board.
I've been a nurse for the last 30 years, and I've worked substantially with, not necessarily Seasons, but as a per diem nurse for hospices in the area. What I think my aspect of what I see as being charitable is that most
Yes, I'm sorry,
hospices-
Mr. O'Brien has an excellent suggestion. why don't you come up here so the microphone can pick up your comments, or just have that nearby?
Okay,
So you'll be adequately recorded. Go ahead, ma'am.
thank you. As a nurse, what I see my pay going toward is coming and giving out medications, advising the parents or the family. And I do want to say one thing about the middle of the night. People had commented on people coming into the facility in the middle of the night. Well, as a contracted per diem nurse, usually with hospice, it's our job to calm the patient so that the patient can, and the family, so the patient can pass it home. So I've never, in all the time that I've worked, shift a patient out in the middle of the night. It's, we're there for that specific purpose. So I wouldn't, and because it's abutting my property, I wouldn't want anything coming in the middle of the night either. But the other thing is, we, as a traditional nurse, my job has been to give traditional medications to help the person. And in this day and age, there's so many alternatives that when people get to the point where maybe their chemo doesn't work anymore, and now they start getting into acupuncture and massage and all these alternative medications that are not paid for by their insurance. This is where the charitable amount comes in, because people are drawing in these services just to stay comfortable, where I don't want to be drugged when I say my final goodbyes. I would prefer to be as comfortable as I can be. And I will speak for my daughter. She is a music therapist, and I know that we talked about music therapy. When she did her internship with Seasons Hospice, and she worked with them for a while as well, a lot of the services that she saw coming in were above and beyond what were paid for by traditional insurance. And it was invaluable what she did with these families, how they wrote a song that totally healed the whole family dynamics and brought them into bereavement. So I really think that what they're doing is an A+ exemplary hospice. And I've worked with several different hospices, and I've never seen this quality of care. So I'm so on board with this, and I just wanted to say that as a professional.
Great. Well, thank you, Ms. Boyd. We appreciate it. Let me see if there's anybody present here this evening other than Ms. Boyd who wishes to speak in favor of this particular application. All right. The record will indicate that there's no such person present. Is there anybody present who has questions of the applicant? Yes, sir. Please tell us your name and address, and make sure you have a microphone. You can come up here.
Just come up.
Sure.
My name is Kerry Choi. I live at 23 Wildwood, and I've lived there for about 35 years. My name is spelled Kerry. Last name is Choi, Choi.
I got that part right.
Okay, good.
Welcome to the board.
Thank you very much.
Delighted to hear from you.
I just have a few questions and comments. My comment is I want to first thank Father Walsh for reaching out.
Well, I've been calling Father Lynch, so you have to forgive me, Father.
To our neighborhood, he's been open and forthcoming and expressed concern, genuine concern about the neighborhood, and we all in the neighborhood, I'm speaking for myself also, particularly appreciate your attitude and your concern very much. And I'd also, like to thank Dr. Shea, who served as a intermediary between our neighborhood and the plans that are seeing the light of day right now. I do think that the issue that was raised about commercial future use is an important issue. I think that this project will probably be commercially successful, but there's no absolute guarantee. My concern is that if the project does not make budget expectations or is not considered a financial success, that there may be a bona fide business reason for ending that use. And then the owner may solicit bids for the land for other uses. And we may get a bid, there may be a bid from an entity well-financed such as CVS. Now, I know that, and they know that they would be buying into a zoning fight, but the dynamics here in Milton and the need for money for the schools would, in my view, already give them a significant, maybe 50% of the popular vote right away. And they may be well-heeled enough to fund a very aggressive and perhaps successful zoning fight. And part of the argument may be that the use here is commercial in nature, and therefore it wouldn't be that much different. I think a way around that, which would give me some peace of mind, would be to ask both the seller and the buyer to consider putting in to the purchase and sale agreement a condition that there be a restrictive covenant that goes with the land, that the land not be sold for commercial use. There is a statutory limitation on the effectiveness of that restrictive covenant. It's not valid for more than 30 years. And if there is a significant change in the neighborhood, there is a process in place whereby that restriction, which could be challenged, is no longer valid. For example, if the church were to sell its land, the land that the actual church building is, and there was a commercial use approved for that, it would no longer make sense to enforce the restrictive covenant right across the street, and it could be challenged. But if the area stays residential and the church stays, as we all hope, that restrictive covenant could be an extra layer of protection against a business plan that didn't work out, and the wind down of the business plan would be to sell to the highest bidder a well-financed commercial entity that may be willing to battle for a zoning variance and change that from residential to commercial. So, because I understand that the buyer's plans do not include selling it for a commercial purpose ever, I would think that the restrictive covenant would not be a significant added obstacle or burden on its part. Because the church, I believe, has the well-being of the neighborhood as a legitimate concern on its part, I don't think such a covenant on the seller's part would be a burden. And I think it would address the issue that was addressed by one of the members of the board about, the future use. So I think there's a way of doing that would certainly address my long-term concerns. And I want to make it very clear that I'm not criticizing the bona fides of anything that has been said here. But the operator, the LLC Massachusetts Corporation, as I understand it, is part of a larger national organization which is for-profit. And ultimately, so the operator is going to be a subsidiary of a national corporation that's for-profit. And that corporation has a fiduciary obligation to its shareholders to maximize reasonably profits. So if the operation is not turning out well, depending upon the terms of the lease, it opens up the possibility of a problem for the neighborhood further down the line. If I thought my suggestion would create a significant obstacle to the buyer or to the seller, I would have reservations about raising it. But I think it is very substantially here a cost-free solution to keep what Milton has zoned residential for at least, for up to 30 more years, depending upon whether or not the use in that area changes. That's one comment. The other comment, very simply, is I think we all would like to see just a little bit more detail with respect to such issues as the lighting plan and how height and the HVAC noise. You can't see it because it's behind that fence on the patio on the second floor. But like to get some information about the amount of noise that's going to be generating around the clock and then on emergencies. So I would request simply that a short period before another hearing. I don't want this thing to be dragged out and made more difficult for anyone involved, but it would be nice to get some of these specifics so everybody would be, fully apprised of both of the mitigation that will be provided for the neighborhood.
Well, no, thank you for coming, Mr. Choi. Let me just ask one question. I think in terms of a perfect world, I understand your position, and obviously the parties can make any types of business deals and covenants to the property as everyone deems appropriate. But let me just see that if you agree with me, that is not the type of condition that the board here can mandate of people coming before it for a special permit.
Well, some issues have been raised here by the board about future use.
Right.
And they can't mandate it, but I think if such a condition exists, they can take it into account.
Absolutely. And likewise, we can take into account the language in the lease to be sure that this operating entity does have a true and bona fide charitable purpose in addition to its public purpose. But I have reservations, and we have one of the finest zoning lawyers in Boston here. I think if the board sought to impose that type of condition, I think that would be an illegal condition.
I'm not saying that it is within the power of the board to mandate. I'm suggesting to the seller and to the buyer that it would be a way of ameliorating and addressing some of the issues raised by the board. And certainly, I think it would go a long way to dealing with the concerns of the neighborhood. And as far as I could tell, it does not deviate one iota from what the plans of the buyer may be right now.
Thank you very much for your comments and your suggestion. We appreciate. Is there anybody else who has any questions of the applicant or wishes to be heard on this application? Okay, so the record indicates there's no such person present. So, Mrs. McGettrick, why don't you come back up here, and do you have anything you want to say?
Well,
Because I think you can certainly address issues of the lighting plan and the vibration of the air conditioning system to make sure that that's
yes, and we've discussed that, and we didn't have a lighting plan ready for tonight, but you've heard described, I think, what the lighting plan would be generally. In terms of the noise, if we can, how would we address that exactly?
Yeah, I mean, Mark and I can talk a little more about that. Let me get it back up. But the condensers for the HVAC, we're gonna put those in the back of the building. They'll be elevated and they'll be screened. And the generator, it doesn't run all the time. It's just considered a backup for the backup. So all the ventilators, they have a battery backup already. And in the event that the power would go out, it would only be supplying power to the ventilators and other critical equipment. They're not meant to power the building. So the generator itself is very small, and it's insulated and it runs off of liquid propane gas, and you don't have to run it and test it frequently. So it's not like other commercial generators.
Can you do a short paragraph or two submittal to the board and file it with Marion's things and make sure Mr. Choi gets a copy of that so that he can be assured as to what equipment is going to be there, what type of vibration or decibels does it emit, and how it should not adversely affect, let's say, the closest 2 or 3 neighboring properties to that.
Sure.
That's something. that
Yeah,
you-
and specifically describing what it's closest to and what the sound suppression.
But we don't need a sound study. We don't
no,
need,
no.
we
No,
need- we don't- we don't
thank
need you
you.
doing ambient sound levels in the middle of the night.
Decibel levels, but I could, speak in generalities about what we would do to mitigate the noise and things like that.
And give us an assurance that that would be adequate.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Mr. O'Brien has a question.
Along that vein, I'm very interested in the operational details. Okay, the operational details.
Yeah,
Okay, I mean, I'm I'm all about practical politics. That's what I do for a living. I don't do zoning, I do practical politics. I want to know when the trash is going to get picked up. I want to know what the size of the dumpster is. I'm very interested in the lighting plan. We've had a lot of talk about Milton Hospital. I've spent a lot of time on the Milton Hospital cases dealing with the lighting plans, so I'm very interested in that. You don't have to do a sound study, as the chairman said, but I'm also I'm very cognizant of those condensers and other things being some of the closest noise generators to the residents. So whatever information that you could supply relative to just how this thing is going to be running, what's going to get delivered, how things are going to get removed, all sorts of stuff, including the removal of some things that may be unique to this particular institution. So I want to know how this is going to work, because a lot of times when we put together special permits, it is full of specific operational requirements.
Okay.
And we did that specifically with Milton Hospital. That's, some of those permits are very detailed
Yes.
in terms of protection of the neighborhood. So let me ask you this, Mrs. McKettrick and your team. How much time do you think I know you want to proceed, and I assume the Archdiocese is going to be kind enough to grant you an extension on the purchase and sale agreement, but how much time do you reasonably need to respond to the inquiries that we've made tonight?
Well, only the lighting stuff.
And let me go on. What the program would be is to pick a date, 30, 45, 60 days, whatever you think you need. We'll try to accommodate you. And then, for example, 10 days before that hearing date, we'd expect you to file the materials, your memorandum, your legal citations, the lease language, or whatever you intend to propose, to file that with the board, Mrs. Fitzgerald, so that the public, if they were concerned, could come right up here to Town Hall and could look at the file and see what's being proposed. And it would also then give the board the opportunity to consider those issues, and you'd essentially have a hot board when you come before us again.
Yeah, we would need to discuss it. I really don't know exactly how much time we need. I mean, we don't need, 60 days or anything like that, but there are some of these items that we'd have to go through and kind of talk about, like, how much time is it going to take to generate lighting study, this lease language, things like that. So we need to just.
Okay, well, see, the
We're
problem
kind
that
of,
we have.
you have to set a date, though. They have to continue to a set date.
So it may be, in light of what you said, Mr. Lewis, I think it is,
Yeah.
we'd maybe
want-
prefer to extend this out a little longer so we don't have to
Right.
set a date and then continue it and
Right.
inconvenience a lot of people.
I mean, 2 weeks might not be enough.
Yeah, 2 weeks may be tough.
No, do you want to
So-
do 30 or 45 days? And we can check with the members?
Yeah, I
as
think
to-
30 days would be adequate. 30 days would be adequate.
Is,
My only hang-up is this lease language, really. Everything else.
you want to talk with
Yeah.
Marion for a second?
Yeah, is that all right?
Just, you can talk with her out there if you want.
Excuse us for 1
We'll have
second.
a brief recess here for about 2 minutes.
Well, we had a,
Yeah,
we
we'll
discussed
bow
it.
out. We worked it out.
And we would say, we would ask for 30 days. Set your next meeting for 30 days. That will give us time to prepare responses on each of these questions, including the lease language, and to give those responses back to you, and we believe we can do it 10 days ahead of the next hearing. And, it's in our best interest to try to respond, but we don't think we can do it in 2 weeks, so we're not going to ask for 2 weeks.
Let me just make a suggestion to you, but it's a pure suggestion.
Okay.
Mrs. Fitzgerald has pointed out that we do have a scheduled hearing on Thursday, April 25, which would be shorter than 30 days, and if you throw 7 days perhaps of materials rather than 10 days.
Okay.
Does that interest you? Or we can just go out 30 days and give you the extra time, give you the extra wiggle room.
Well, we're only at the 2nd of
We're in the
April
second
today.
day, so that's almost
So
over.
that's close to 30, and if you'll agree to 7 days ahead rather than 10 days
Yeah.
ahead, it's basically the
Does that
same
make, do you
thing.
want to shoot for that?
Yes.
With the proviso that if you just can't be ready,
Right.
that you'll let us know and let the neighbors know, and then we'll bump it over for another
And
couple.
you'd have to open it and close it at that date.
Yeah, if you give us the 7 days,
We'll give you
we
7
can
days,
work
that's
within
fine.
that. Yeah.
Let me do this. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're suggesting here is going over to the 25th of April. Does that create an insurmountable problem for anybody in the audience so that they can't be present and they really have to be present? Okay, I don't see any objections to that. So I think that's what we're going to do. We'll go over to the 25th. We have one hearing, and Mr. Sheffield is representing the applicant. It may go a half an hour or so. I just don't know whether there's community opposition. So we'd probably be starting at 8 o'clock.
8 p.m.
That would give us another 2.5 hours to try to conclude this hearing, and I think that should be adequate. And so 7 days before the 25th, we'd request that you file your materials with Mrs. Fitzgerald, and everyone out there will know that the materials have to be filed on the 25th. And I know Mrs. McGettrick, if somebody wanted a copy of those materials, I know the applicant would be willing to get a copy of those as filed materials with the board to anybody who requests it. And just make sure you follow through. You can always come to Town Hall and look at the documents as well. It's just maybe a little more complicated to get copies of the documents. Now, before we adjourn, Doctor had something to say. Dr. Shep, do you have something to say?
I just had two quick comments and,
Yes, sir.
and one question. My comments are, I think this is a great idea for the neighborhood and for the town. I really do. It will benefit everyone. My second comment, I'd like to commend the board for their sticky questions. I love it, because it protects the neighborhood and the abutters especially. And that's been Father Welsh's main concern through this whole thing, protect the neighborhood. And my last question, and I hope Attorney McGettrick might be able to answer this, and it might help the board, is there anything in the purchase and sale agreement from the Archdiocese that dictates as to use of the property?
Yes, and actually, what I failed to do at the beginning, oh, excuse me, may I?
Oh, of course you can.
I was supposed to hand you at the beginning of the hearing the redacted copy of the purchase and sale agreement. And there is a clause in the purchase and sale agreement, which has not been redacted, which specifies that the use will be for a hospice, so on and so forth. So that will be given to you, and presumably, since it's being given to you, it would be available if somebody wishes to review.
Sure, it would be a public document and would be in the file if need be. And so do you have a copy you want to file with the board?
Yes, I have it, and I will, it's either right here or it's in my case, but
Okay, so you'll file it
continue, and I will
before we
post-
adjourn.
Before you
you'll-
adjourn, I'll bring it up to you. I'm sorry, I meant to give it to you at the beginning of the hearing, so.
Okay, that's fine. So if nobody has any further comments, and without further ado, we're going to adjourn this hearing to Thursday, April 25th at 8 p.m. And if anybody has any questions, please see Mrs. Fitzgerald. She's here 5 days a week, and we'll be happy to be of assistance to anybody. And thank everyone for coming here tonight, for expressing your views. And as usual, in my experience, and I've been doing this for, I think, 15 years, more or less, even on complicated issues such as the hospital, we've always had wonderful neighborhood participation, sincere and good faith comments, which really help the board in reaching decisions. But it's all been in a spirit of fair play, and that's been evidenced tonight. So thank you all for your participation, and we'll see you on the 25th at 8 o'clock. So we're adjourned.